Before I start with this video, I wanted to read a little quote to you. And it reads, "A truth teller disturbs, alerts, wakens, and warns against indifference to injustice and complacency about the needs of human beings. Some of us also know of abuse in our families and our churches and have done and said nothing so as to protect the structure, the institution, rather than the victim. When it comes to injustice, silence is not a virtue. It is a vice 2 times compounded because it contains both indifference to the victims and complicity with the destroyers. In such instances, we have failed to do justice. The call to do justice is the call to be like God. In failing to do justice, we do not look like Christ in this world. And not looking like Christ, we have failed to worship him." Dr. Diane Langberg. When we think of biblical justice, something that ought to come to mind is our salvation story for those of us who are believers, those of us who are disciples of Jesus. The only way that you or I could be made right with God the Father is because of the essence of the just character that he holds and permeates throughout his entire personhood. When a person sins against a holy and righteous God, there is no looking over the sin that has been committed against that holy and just God. Those who have sinned against that holy and just God are deserving, all of us, of capital punishment, resulting in death, eternal separation from God the Father. Now, there is a solution, there is a way to the Father, and that's Jesus. But we don't get there just yet without acknowledging the just and righteous character and holy character of God. The only way that a person can be made right with God is by the sacrifice and atonement and appeasement of his wrath. So for those of you who are familiar with anything Bible related, you would know that in the Old Testament, sacrifices had to be made to atone for the sin of the people. And now, as there's been a new covenant ushered in, on the heels of Jesus' life, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension, with the future promise of our inheritance that he will come back for his bride, and there will be a new heaven and new earth meeting together, we have the opportunity to enter into that covenant with God the Father, and God the Spirit, and Jesus himself. But only by God's wrath having been poured out on Jesus. The Father turned his face away from his Son so that his justice could be met, that his wrath could be poured out, that his wrath could be satisfied. And so when we talk about biblical justice, and we talk about why justice matters to our fellow neighbor, those created in the image of God, as we learn about in Genesis, that all is made possible through the sacrifice of Jesus. And the reason why you and I feel this tension and war in our souls when justice goes unserved is because of what the Father has done through Christ and has made possible through the power and work of the Holy Spirit. Now that's the short gospel message for you today. If you have any more questions about what justice looks like, or you want to do a study of that, I will link a video down below to the Bible Project website. They're an incredible ministry that provides different resources and content to help believers grow in their faith and knowledge of the scriptures. So before we get any further into this video, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with our definitions. When you see the title, Investigating Spiritual Abuse within Pinky Promise and the Gathering Oasis Church, I want you to understand what I mean by spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is the use of faith, belief, and or religious practices to coerce, control, or damage another for a purpose beyond the victim's well-being. Now, I understand that for many of you, this may be your first time even hearing of spiritual abuse. You may have heard of sexual abuse or emotional abuse or financial abuse, but you may have never heard of this. And I want you to know that I was once in your shoes. I once never knew this was a thing. But I'm pretty sure that if you started to sift your mind or sift the conversations that you've had with others about things that they've experienced within the church at large that have been harmful to them, they would fit right within this definition pretty well. And so moving forward, I want to share with you all a little bit about my experience and involvement within Pinky Promise and the Gathering Oasis Church. Now, I haven't said my name yet, but my name is Diane Mathis, and I am a former member of Pinky Promise. I started following Heather Lindsay and Cornelius Lindsay back when I was in college. I started college in 2012 at the University of Florida, and this was right before I became a believer in 2013, February of 2013. And I remember following her on Instagram back when things were kind of like Instagram was newer and all of that. And I was so captivated by her person. I was so captivated by who she was and what she portrayed. And I followed her. And then soon after that, I started a chapter at my college. I chartered a chapter at the University of Florida, and I became the president of it. And so my ties with Pinky Promise in that sense go back pretty far now. It's been about 5 years since I left, but I started that chapter on my college campus back in 2013 it was, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's very important to let you all know where I came from, because I'm not just somebody who's on the fringes making a video about someone who hurt me. I was very involved and invested in this organization. I went to the conference. I bought some books. I recommended this organization to friends and family members, people I love and care about. And so you can imagine it was to my dismay when I personally had an experience with Heather online that was very disheartening. And so I'm sharing this because my experience isn't one that I hang on to anymore. I mean, it happened. It is what it is. But I learned shortly after my experience then that many of the women and members of Pinky Promise have had experiences like this, where they've had a post subliminally made about them, a video subliminally made about them. They've tried to disagree, on different posts that Heather has made, only to have been blocked and deleted. And so there's a lot of silencing that has been happening over the years. People don't feel comfortable speaking out because there's a loyal following that both she and her husband have that allow people to just basically say whatever they want to those who are dissenting voices. Shortly after I left the ministry, that happened to be, if I'm not mistaken, after the Pinky Promise conference. I had visited their church right after the conference, and then I probably attended their church maybe about 3 or 4 Sundays, and then I never became a member. Upon moving to Atlanta, when I originally moved to Atlanta, I thought I was going to be a member of their church. I thought I was going to be serving. I had a heart to do so. But before I could even make that decision, the Lord showed me some things that I hadn't realized before that I knew ultimately He was protecting me from. And so moving forward, over the years, after I had left, after I had disassociated myself with the ministry, the Lord did an upheaval and all sorts of things in my own theology and showed me I didn't know how to read the Bible, and I wasn't biblically literate, and I needed to pursue Him to understand why I believed what I actually believed. I came to learn from various victims of spiritual abuse from not only Pinky Promise, but the Gathering Oasis Church that told me in confidence things that they had been experiencing within the organization and the church for years. This is and was particularly concerning for me because an organization I invested time and money and energies into, only to see that things were happening behind closed doors that the general public and myself had no knowledge about until people came and confided in me about things that had been going on. It made me sick to my stomach to hear the things that people have went through. And for the past 5 years, I have been unable to share any of those accounts, any of those stories, because they're not mine to tell, and they were told to me in confidence. A lot of the victims of spiritual abuse within these entities have shared how they're afraid, they're fearful. Some of them have been threatened. And I personally cannot allow myself to have knowledge about something that's been going on like this in an organization, in a church, for years, and not speak out about it, especially because I once was involved in the organization. Some of my closest friends today are former members of the Gathering Oasis Church, and the circumstances and conditions in which they had to leave are very heartbreaking. So that leads to this project. I really desire for those who have been harmed by Heather, by Cornelius, by leaders within their church, by leaders within their ministries, to be able to speak out and have their voices heard. A lot of individuals who have supported their ministries, whether from following online to being a part of a local chapter in their community to visiting or attending their church and serving, don't have any idea of the things that I have knowledge about. And I believe they are to be made public knowledge because there have been warnings over the years to the Lindsays about what they've been doing and how it's been harming God's people. And they have not heeded those warnings. I personally would prefer not to even have to do this. But it's gotten to a point where I cannot, as I stated earlier, hear yet another story, watch yet another victim walk away from the faith, suffer trauma, suffer damage on the account of those who are masquerading themselves as leaders of God, but behind closed doors, and even sometimes out in front of the general public, covertly are doing things that are harmful to the body of Christ. I know all too well what it's like to have anxiety over things like this. I know all too well what it's like to leave a ministry, to leave a place, and have to break down the theology and the abuses and all of those things that have happened as a result of being in particular spaces. And the sad part about all of this is the victims are the ones who are left to clean up after those who have abused them. And just taking a look at scripture, in Ecclesiastes 3:7 it says, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak. Friends, I've been silent for a while I've let the victims have their time to heal. I've been silent for a while with respecting that people's stories are not mine to tell unless they give me the permission to do that. I understand that there are times for us to observe and to acknowledge, and then there's times for us to do what needs to be done to ensure that these types of things don't happen to other people. Proverbs 31:8-9 says, "Speak up for those who have no voice, for the justice of all who are dispossessed. Speak up, judge righteously, and defend the cause of the oppressed and the needy." I heard early in the quote that I read by Dr. Diane Langberg, there are many of us who have seen things happening in and around us, whether it be our own families or within our own church communities, that grieve the heart of God, that are not His will for His people, nor for those who are called to lead them and care for their souls. This all matters for both parties involved. It matters for the victims, for those who have been silenced and manipulated and gaslighted and feared into not speaking out. And this also matters for those who have been doing the abusing and those who have been complicit and culpable in allowing these things to continue, because they need assistance and recovery and healing as well. And I am calling for both. that the victims get the care and recovery and healing that they need to, as well as those who have harmed and abused getting the care and recovery and healing that they desperately need as well. I want to be very clear here. I am not putting this effort by myself. I have an accountability team of women who I have hand-selected that I trust, that are honest, that are faithful, that love God's people and want to see this done rightly. So, in short, I'd like to share what exactly it is that I'm looking for. I am looking for victims of spiritual abuse by Pinky Promise, the Gathering Oasis Church, and any of the prominent leaders within those ministries to come forward, to step out with courage and faith and conviction and boldness and share their stories. Down below in the description box and everywhere on pretty much all of my social media, you will find a link to a questionnaire where I'm asking intentional questions to see if you are the right fit to share your story, whether you're in a good place emotionally and spiritually, to give you an opportunity to share any documents or attachments that you may have, to hear your story, to hear you and your experience, as well as get to the bottom of what's been going on. Because like I said, I know things. I've heard stories for a long time, and the issue has not gotten better. It's only gotten worse. And so I want to give victims and survivors an opportunity to share what it is that they have gone through, and to get justice for you all. Because we look at qualifications for leaders within God's church, they are very clear. They're laid out throughout the scriptures. And so when there are leaders who are misusing and abusing the sheep, they're feeding on the sheep rather than feeding the sheep, there's an issue with that. And I might be speaking a little bit softly, but I want you to know that this rumbles the heart of God. He is not pleased with any of this. And so if that is you, if that has been your experience, maybe you've been kind of on the outside, you've had maybe some bad interactions with either of these ministries or their leaders, online or in any other avenues, please reach out. I need you to share who you are. I need you to share and hear what your experience was like. And then also for those who remain on the inside, or those who were once in the inside and then left, I want to hear your stories as well. I want you to know that they're going to be heard in a safe space. The only eyes that will see this are myself, and will be edited as well, to bring forth to my team to ensure that if you desire to remain anonymous, you can. But I want you to know that in all of this, this is being done to see God's reputation restored and maintained here in the earth, as well as to see this continue no more in the harming and abuse of God's people, as well as getting the care necessary for the leaders who have been abusing the sheep. Just as much as the victims need the help, they do as well. And so I hope that you would partner with me, my team, partner with the Lord in this work to bring justice and end to spiritual abuse right now. It doesn't have to happen to another person before we see it get really serious. Right now, today is the time to be serious about justice. Right now is a time to be serious about seeing spiritual abuse end and its effects cease. And right now is the time to take a survey of our own hearts and ask the question of, have I turned a blind eye to this? Have I been complicit? Have I not been an advocate and friend to those who needed it? And if I failed to see this happening around me, why is it that that is so? There's so many pieces that play a part in all of this, and you are one of them. So please share your stories down below if you have anything to say regarding this investigation of spiritual abuse within Pinky Promise and the Gathering Oasis Church. I wish I could share the things that I currently know with you guys, but a lot of individuals have asked to remain anonymous, and many of them are fearful of sharing publicly, and so I need your help to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. And so again, if you would, the link is down below. If you're watching this on Instagram or anywhere else, I would ask that you would visit any of the links in my bios there, to share your story. You may ask why? Why do this? Because when I read the book of Exodus and I saw how God responded to the cries for help from the people of Israel, he saw and heard what they were experiencing. I was forever changed by that. And I said, no more. God raised up a whole leader in the name of Moses to bring his people out of a land of much abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. So I know for a fact that abuse is not the heart of God. It does not reflect the heart nor character of God. So let's do something about it. I thank you so much for watching this video, and you all will be hearing more from me soon.